A lot of people would have gone broke because your farm was worth nothing if you couldn't farm it and you couldn't build on it.
Back in 1894, Congress passed the Carey Act. It would grant each state 1 million acres of desert land if that land could be irrigated and farmed within 10 years. Twin Falls was prime location for such an endeavor, with local entrepreneurs I.B. Perrine and steel magnate and multi-millionaire Frank Buell joining together to tap the Snake River and funnel water to farmers. Well, tapping into a seemingly endless supply seemed to solve the big problem of how to populate a desert. However, that actually created another problem that for years farmers just couldn't figure out until they did 100 years ago this year. It took a renegade and some TNT, and the solution was something most Twin Falls residents don't even realize is just about 10 feet under their feet. There are more than 1 million acres of irrigated farmland in the Magic Valley. Without water, Twin Falls, with its combination of cultivation and cul-de-sacs, wouldn't be what it is today. But with it, it almost wasn't either. Brian Olmsted's roots in Twin Falls run 4 generations deep. But there were some things about his hometown. We'll follow you.
Okay, yeah.
Even he didn't know about.
So I'd always heard about these myths of the tunnels my whole life. There's a couple spots here that are kind of head bonkers for me, but just keep your eyes open. But I never really thought it was real until I went to work for the canal company.
That was nearly 25 years ago.
You know, you always had the stories about hobos that lived in them, and you know that there were murderers and everything else. This one goes just about 2,000 feet, a little under a half a mile.
These tunnels weren't created by chance. They were forced into this lava rock.
You see that?
For a reason.
That's a well that they drilled to bring air in to the tunnel.
For that reason, you have to go back to about the time Brian's great-grandfather made the Magic Valley his home.
Yeah, yep.
In 1904.
And you were buying land on a promise that next year we're going to have you water. And
it was a promise made to a lot of people.
It wasn't called the Idaho Trail. They couldn't wait to get out of here because Oregon had water.
Twin Falls would get water when that commitment was kept in 1905. The completion of the Milner Dam on the Snake River and the subsequent canals opened the gates for irrigating thousands of acres of future farmland.
If you had been here in 1903 and come back in 1906, it would have seemed like magic to see, what was growing in the fields at the time.
But the illusion would reveal itself within a few years.
Yeah, by 1911, they were aware that they had a problem.
Jim Gentry is a local historian.
And I'm kind of fascinated in terms of local history, in terms of how problems are dealt with.
The problem Twin Falls farmers were dealing with in the 1910s?
Just too much water.
How could that be possible in a high desert landscape of lava rock and sagebrush? Well, when farmers on the south side of the Snake River found ways to bring water to their fields, they assumed what wasn't absorbed by the crops would filter underground and eventually come out the porous canyon walls, just like it did on the north side. What they didn't realize was just about 4 feet below the surface was a thick and pretty solid layer of lava rock.
It did not drain, the water did not drain the way they had anticipated, and so it created a real problem for them.
Several months into the growing season, the water had nowhere to go but back up.
So it just built pressure and pressure, and then it just came up, just bubbling up everywhere out of the lava and then up through the soil. By 1911, the groundwater had risen so high that there were farms just turning into swamps.
By that time, nearly 150,000 acres around Twin Falls was being used for farming, a small percentage of which was succumbing to seepage.
By 1913, there were about 500 acres that could not be cultivated.
500 acres.
500
Doesn't seem like a lot.
But it kept growing more.
Digging drainage ditches and wells, the Twin Falls Canal Company was able to reclaim a few acres at a time. But they couldn't keep the drainage problem contained.
Well, the issue was that in an area that seemingly had an unlimited amount of water in a good sense, it ended up being an unlimited water in the bad sense in terms of drainage.
Then, in 1924, Burton Smith, the newly named general manager of the canal company, decided to take a different tact with a piece of property just above Rock Creek Canyon.
If a deep trench will drain, maybe 40 acres, then if we can blast a tunnel underneath and drill wells down to it, we can maybe drain a whole square mile at a time.
Smith asked the canal company board for permission to try a tunnel. He was denied. He did it anyway. Blasts of dynamite shook the city of Twin Falls. Before long, those dry run reverberations would eventually hit pay dirt.
When they started blasting back in there, the ground above just went and it drained.
With water passing through the sporadic cracks in the rock and random wells drilled from the surface,
That's one of the wells, and that will be producing water later.
this first tunnel
I think we're 1,100 feet now.
would soon drain about 1,000 acres of farmland, with 3.2 million gallons of water a day dropping into Rock Creek Canyon. What proved to be the perfect solution to their problem,
They had 8 tunnels going, I think, within a couple of years of that.
made possible because of an experiment by a mutineer manager.
And that story is popular because it fits our sense of Western individualism and not letting the bureaucracy hold you back.
And that's the tale of how these tunnels
Pretty much, yeah.
saved Twin Falls.
The reason it saved Twin Falls is that without those tunnels, the land would have become worthless.
Well, that first tunnel, known then as the All Tunnel because of who owned the property above, became known as the Fish Hatchery Tunnel because the water coming out of it, was filtered, 58 degrees, and perfect conditions for a fish hatchery, which they built below in Rock Creek Canyon. That led to dozens more tunnels being dug by professionals, more expertly carved this time over the years, which would feed several other canyons like Dry Creek, Dead Man's Gulch, Cedar Draw by Filer, and Mud Creek by Buell. This took about 30 years to get this completed. Brian Olmsted says it takes the water about 2 months into the growing season to work its way down into the tunnels, so that by the fall, most tunnels are running about knee deep. Brian also said some of that they can re-deliver to farmers to extend the growing season on low water years. He helped historian Jim Gentry write his new book called The 51 Tunnels That Saved Twin Falls. Now, those tunnels, they're not open to the public, but we were lucky enough to get a tour. When I say we, I mean my photographer, Kevin Esslinger, and I. Except Kevin followed Brian all the way to the end of that fish hatchery tunnel, all 1,828 feet of it. I did not. Me in closed spaces, we do not do so well together. But Kevin, he did leave me behind with a camera about 300 feet from the entrance.
If you can't go, Brett. Kevin has been gone for 30 minutes. I'm stuck here, about 100, 150 yards to the entrance. I don't know where they are. It's been 30 minutes. It's now 2 o'clock. Kevin and I separated about 40 minutes ago, and he's somewhere way up there. I don't know where. I'm not going to the bathroom. It's cold in here. You can see your breath. Clothes are sticking to them, getting splattered by water off the side of the walls. 40 minutes. No! There's no echo. There's no echo. It goes nowhere. It's dead. It's dead in here. Dead in here. I see a light coming this way. Hooray! We may be safe.
Okay, so we shot that story a while ago. I'd forgotten I had recorded those while I was all alone in the tunnel, by the way. Did I relieve myself in that tunnel? Look, it's not my proudest moment, but I was there for nearly an hour just by myself. Not one of my proudest moments, as I said. Good news is that water, it no longer feeds the fish hatchery.